Hello and welcome back, all my favorite coder cats and coder kittens. As usual, it is I, Becca, going by Netcats Meow most places online, here to talk to you again about Linden scripting language. In this week's video, we're going to finish up our little mini-series on using prim attributes as a database system, and that will open us up for an entirely new set next week, where I've been asked to talk about alpha settings and proper control and how they all affect different things and how the different types of alpha work under different circumstances. So that will cover next week's. For those that are still interested in the fact that I was planning on another video series, the Weekly Nerd News, I have had an incredibly busy week with a friend of mine coming up through town to stay for a couple of weeks here. So I will go back to figuring out what was wrong between what my phone records and what the program I use for editing can handle. Once I get that all figured out, the Weekly Nerd News should become a weekly thing. And if I get the workflow down on that, who knows? Maybe there'll be a third weekly series in the making. Once I get that one going, I can be ambitious. But without further ado, I return you to our nice little bit here. Where we set different particular fields in here to mean different things. We had name, town, race, weapon, class, and defense. Naturally, I rely on my catitude as my primary means of defense. Not everybody's got what it takes to be a purple-haired coder kitty, now do they? I mean, admittedly, most people don't have purple hair, so, right there. Anyhow, so in order to go ahead and set this up to hold different stats, a good thing if you want to add numeric values into your data set. We've covered how to use the name and the description, and if you need a third element, how to use the text that would float atop the prim. I didn't go and use that in this larger example because in the earlier videos when I showed that to you, it takes a bit to parse that back down. That adds a little more that has to be done. As in, it takes extra steps and extra code and extra time. It's not something that's going to interfere in most cases, but if you're really worrying about things running fast, the extra time to parse that out might actually have an impact. So, the last thing we're going to add is something that really only works for numerical data. Specifically, data that you can turn into a 0 to 1 float, which is a floating point variable. So you can probably want to keep it down to 0 to 100. And you can store up to 3 pieces of information in a vector. In this case, we're going to use the color vector, which is why we're restricting it to that 1 to 100, because we can break that down to 0.01 as 1, 0.52 as 52, 1 as 100, just by how we deal with that. So we're going to go ahead and add 3 basic attributes. If any of you happen to be into playing tabletop role-playing games, then you will be familiar with one called GURPS. For ease, I'm going to be pulling the attributes from there, since I'm well familiar with it, and it works out for here. Status equals int. Here stays the same. Text box. your intelligence stat. Now, for those that are actually familiar with it, those stats usually run from like 1 to 20. We're actually going to be, but there's a way to work with that, and I will go over that in a moment. Intelligence, Dex. And hit or health. This is also going to, I guess, double as a way of how to talk about how to convert your preferred numeric system into something of use. If status equals the lowercase int dex hit, int dex hit. If you're just coming into this video in the middle of this little mini series, just go ahead and look at the playlist and go back for the previous couple of ones. In the previous video before this, I go through and discuss what each of these different pieces of information actually cover. So at this point, we're just going through and making these work the same way the others did. Which was covered in the previous video. Now, instead of set link primitive parameters for description, this is where we're really going to be changing things. Because what we're going to do is we're going to assemble a new vector. Now, as I said, if you're working with the actual GURP system, the numbers go from 1 to 20 instead of from 0 to 10. Now, there's a very convenient way to work with that, and that would be if you consider 10 the middle ground, then we can treat 10 as 0, and we can use positive or negative numbers. But that would not actually work with a color vector, come to think of it. So what we're actually going to do is we're just going to use a simple point 1 is 10, point 2 is 20, and then anything in between. So that's actually how we're going to be able to work this best. Excuse me for the other stuff I was rambling, but at this point I'm a little deep in it to easily edit it back out. Sorry about that. So, you get down here. When it hears this, it's going to hear this as a string. So, this means we're going to wind up casting. So, your int stat is going to be stats.x equals float message. stats y equals float message. Stats z equals float message. And once it gets the last one of these, while it's setting all this up, we are going to find out what face we're dealing with here. String detected touched face. What I got wrong in there initially was that it's not touched. Past tense is detected touch face. And that is 2. So after it receives this, we are going to set color to, comma, stats. Sorry about that. I got the order of arguments incorrect with the first one. So, set color, stats, face 2. I could also make this set link color, put link in the wrong place, link color 1, comma, stats 2. Sorry for having to step away there for just a moment. Had something related to a bit of a business thing that had gone on a while back I needed to respond to. So, apologies for the interruption. We are now back on track. So, we're going to have this proceed to say this, and we're going to draw the class, which was get link primitive parameters, prim3, prim name. There we go. And then, if I remember right, class is the same thing in prim2. No, race is prim2. That's what that is. What I want to do basically is have it say this coder kitty. Once I get everything all neat and ready. Saving periodically just to make sure that it takes everything just right. And when I had started to write this out before, by the way, before I got interrupted by that message I had to respond to, I went ahead and created a vector within this for stat where it pulls the color, since this is going to be for the prim it's in, for face 2, which is where we set it up to put the color that the stats become, as an int of string. And actually, a better way to do it even still would be integer int equals stat.x times 100. So string int. And I will go through and actually reconfigure the parts up there because I realize I had not done that yet. So, and also this will make it easier to not get everything mixed up. Plus Dexter is just a slightly less shortened version of dexterity. Plus okay. Now, though with multiplying it by that would actually create a solid integer, I did not consider the fact that that is human logic, not computer logic. It's starting with a float. It doesn't know that we're restricting ourselves to only 2 decimal places, so it needs to think it's seeing more floats in order for that to work. So, moving back up here, we're going to correct the one little thing that I had gotten slightly wrong. Float. That should be integer to start with. Integer value equals integer message. And then we're going to take value and divide it by 100. That was a thing I didn't think through enough when I initially put that in here. That is a thing that sometimes happens if I'm thinking several steps ahead, and that's a thing to try to keep in mind when you're programming, is that you may know exactly what you have in mind, but sometimes you have to remember, you have to be careful not to lose track of some of the intermediate steps along the way sometimes. So, all right. And that correcting it back is just to prevent it from searching these loops again. Again, that's a problem we had with the earlier version. And in this case, my problem is I, 1, wrote out message, and 2, did not put in the semicolon. As many times as I tell you all, love your semicolons. You'd think I would have that down by now, but occasionally I don't. Alright. Now to see if all this works the way we're expecting. Choose your name. Back up. Choose your race. Kitty. Choose your class. Coder. Choose your hometown. Sec life. Choose your weapon. Code skills. Your armor. Catitude. Intelligence stat. Dexterity stat. Health stat. Now you saw that went ahead and changed its color. So it did, in fact, process a change in all of those. Let's see if they come out correctly. Okay, only one thing really wrong, and that is right there. Becca is a coder from Second Life. This coder, int of 20, dex of 15, health of 10. Only really a couple of things to change there, such as, I'm going to show you how to actually make a real integer out of a float. You see, it took it this time because with LL round, it's telling us to round that to the nearest whole. This way, it knows it's getting rid of all the extra decimal places that could be a problem with a float, so it is actually ready to accept it as an integer. So that solved one thing there. The other is I forgot to change that to prim2 for reading the name for race. So let's see how much prettier this looks when we run it this way. Submit. Might have a touch of pride in that, but it's my demonstration. I can claim I'm as genius as I want to. There we go. This coder kitty has an int of 20, a dex of 15, health of 10. It did not actually break those down. What did we do different? We did not change their type to integer. So, if I change those to integer, we'll get the same smooth result there. Got caught up in demonstrating, forgot to fix. But that is an example of how you can even use numeric values inherent in a vector for the colors in order to store some of your information. It all depends on what information you want to store. So we can do text, we can do numerics, and you can do whatever addition, subtraction, multiplication, or transformation you need to on those different pieces of information, depending on the needs of the data you're working with. As always, the purpose of most of these videos is to show a example project that tells you how a given thing can be done. There we go. That's all nice and neat. How a given thing can be done. It's not necessarily about showing every single variation of it. There are so many different things you can choose to do with code in Second Life that really the best thing I can do is just give you the tools to be able to understand how to figure out the solutions to your problems. So I won't always know exactly what you're trying to create, and sometimes if I do, I may not make exactly that because I will make the thing that I think illustrates the concepts the best, and then leave you and anybody else who's watching with the knowledge to be able to proceed and make the thing you want. So that will go ahead and do us up for this episode. Next episode will focus on different types of alpha masking, which alpha masking, for those that aren't already familiar, is transparency in a prim. It's, if you look at that little art piece behind me, how you can see through the interior of those boxes better than you can the outside. That is because there is an alpha channel on that prim. We will be discussing those in depth next week, along with constructing a HUD control for how to manipulate the different parts of it. I will also be going over one of the pitfalls of playing around with alpha. That is the fact that I have to put the disclaimer that what I'm going to cover is absolutely not meant to be used for griefing purposes, and I've actually been thinking of building a demo of it to test and then give to Linden Labs in the hopes that they can make a patch or something, if they haven't already since I discovered it. But I did accidentally cause a good chunk of my sim to auto-return itself once playing with alpha. So I will go over that particular danger and how not to accidentally create a sim nuke at some point during the series on alpha maskings and controlling them through code. So, hope to see you all back for that one. In the meantime, as usual, these videos go live Tuesday by noon Eastern Standard Time. The description will include a link to the Discord channel if anybody who's watching them is not already a member of that little community there. It will include a link to the full playlist, so if anybody comes across these videos out of the blue, then they'll have a good way to go and find the rest of them. And a bit of pride and a reason why people might randomly find these videos is recently when I was looking up the order of operations on a given command, I discovered, to my wonder and surprise, that my video was number 3 on the Google search ratings. The only two above it were the actual LSL wikis that have basically been here as long as Second Life has existed. So, we may be a niche community and a very niche channel, but it's kind of proof that we are a big deal in this niche. And I owe it to every one of you that watches these regularly and subscribes and comments on the videos. The prominence to be able to be sorted in the top 5 of Google's search for even one time in something related to Linden scripting language. It's pretty amazing. And really, I owe that to all of you, to the community that's following these videos. It's your all's dedication to watching them and your following my content that put it there. So, thank all of you. It's an amazing feeling to actually feel like something I do is relevant somehow. And that's because you all have proven it's relevant by following it. So, thank you. Thank you so much. I guess that's it for now. So, as usual, good day, good luck, happy coding. Meow meow.